this building resentment at Gormanism and the rampant corruption that ran Maryland and Baltimore in particular, it was obviously building up. And it looked like there might be an opportunity for change in the year 1895. 1895, that year, there was a anti-Gorman Democrat. His name was William Kaiser, and he helped kind of split the Democratic Party. And although Kaiser wound up not being a big vote getter in the final election, he created this division within the Maryland Democrats that created opportunity for the Maryland Republicans. Now remember, usually Republicans got about 40% of the statewide vote. That's almost all Maryland's black people voting Republican, and then something like 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 4 white people voting Republican. Well, here in 1895, the Republican candidate for governor was Lloyd Lowndes, which is kind of hard to say. Lloyd Lowndes. And Lowndes was, he had made his money in banking out in western Maryland, and he was an apparently genuine reformer who believed in clean government. He was also more sympathetic to black people's legal rights than most of the people we've seen governing Maryland. The candidate for mayor in Baltimore was Alcaeus Hooper, and Hooper had the backing of the Baltimore Reform League, Charles Bonaparte. He seemed, at least, like he was in the same kind of mold as Lloyd Lowndes. So, the Democrats are a little bit divided. The Republicans have solid candidates who can help build public trust. The Democrats' strategy in response was to yell on social media with phrases like Negro equality, Negro supremacy. They laid it on thick, and they were pretty relentless. You can see it in just this small selection that I've included here, but it was all over the place. Republican success means Negro equality. There you go. Pay no attention to any of the other issues happening. The only thing that matters, the Democrats say, is that, oh my gosh, black people might have rights. As you can see down here, this is classic, like Southern stuff. The undeniable fact remains that with our people, there is a broad line that divides the races, a line which the Creator has drawn, and neither cajolery nor coercion can ever eradicate that line. The men south of the Mason and Dixon line instinctively regard the Negro as their social inferior, and nothing save the greed of political plunder would induce even the most rabid Republican or degraded white man to accord the Negro a vote or a voice in national, state, or local government. Whew, okay. And same theme here. This article is basically, black people want schools to be equal. How dare you vote Republican? The schools might wind up being equal. Same theme over here. Black people want political representation. How could you vote for the party that might lead to black political representation? Freak out, white people. That's the message from the Democratic Party in Maryland. And this was a strategy that worked all across the South. And so it makes sense that the Democrats would go to this playbook here in Maryland. The idea was always just hold up the sign and warn everybody about Negro supremacy, and they won't pay attention to all the issues happening behind the sign. But it didn't work. Here in Maryland, at least in the year 1895, it didn't work. The Republicans won big. Big for Maryland. 52% of voters voted for Lloyd Lowndes. Now remember, Gorman isn't running for anything here, but as the boss of Maryland politics, when the Republicans win, everybody views that as a repudiation of Gorman, which is why you have the cartoon here, Gorman repudiated by Maryland. So your new mayor of Baltimore, Alceus Hooper. And it wasn't just the mayorship. The Republicans won the Baltimore City Council, both chambers rather, of the Baltimore City Council, and they won complete control of the state legislature. Maryland Senate, Maryland House of Delegates. It's a sweep for the Republicans. Remember, Republicans had never controlled Maryland's government, and they sweep into victory here. And the question then is, well, did they mean it? Right? Because they promised reform, and now they have control. It's not like it's a divided government and the Republicans control part of it and the Democrats the other part. Republicans have total power, top to bottom. And, well, they started reforming. Republicans made some changes. They passed laws, here's some highlights, to strengthen the secret ballot, or what was referred to at the time as the Australian ballot, which is the idea that your vote should be private. Obviously, the public voting has been a big part of the election corruption and violence. So, secret ballot. They also passed a law to end the long-standing policy of the Eastern Shore getting one of Maryland's 2 Senate seats. The Eastern Shore didn't have anywhere close to half Maryland's population, and the Eastern Shore was much more solidly Democratic. The Republicans created a bipartisan commission that led to a new city charter for Baltimore. And it kind of reallocated power in Baltimore. So there were a bunch of reforms designed to try to curb corruption in Baltimore, to limit the power of ward leaders. One specific example of the way that the reforms tried to change things. They created a independent commission that would award city contracts in Baltimore. When city contracts were awarded by the city council, bribery was rampant. And so the idea is that if you make those decisions by unelected officials who are appointed, not dependent on their re-election campaign, then maybe they'll make less corrupt decisions. They also moved Baltimore's elections from the fall back to the spring, or forward to the spring, back to the spring, so that the Baltimore elections stand alone, not connected to the statewide elections. This one I think was pretty self-interested. I think the Republicans thought that they'd have a better chance at winning Baltimore elections if it wasn't tied to state and national campaigns. Lots of these reforms they're designed to clean up corruption, which would also benefit the Republicans. So is the goal just to benefit the Republicans, or is it to clean up corruption? I mean, I think in their minds, it's both. Oh, one thing that was clear as soon as Lowndes got elected was that Gorman was going to get bounced out of the Senate. Gorman's U.S. Senate term ended, or will end, in 1898. And remember, senators get appointed by the state government. So obviously, the Republicans now controlling the state aren't going to send Gorman back. So Gorman is in the Senate, but sort of watching the ticking clock, waiting for when they tell him, no, we don't want you, dude. In this era where the Republicans controlled the levers of the government, Harry Scythe Cummings got re-elected to the Baltimore City Council in 1896. He lost 2 years later in 1898. So if you were living through this period, it was kind of like he was in office and then they'd rally the voters in the opposite direction a little bit and vote him out. He returned, we'll come back to this later, he returned to that seat on the Baltimore City Council in 1907 and then held it consecutively for 10 years. Throughout this period, he continued to practice law in Baltimore and to advocate for black education in Baltimore. He also was an active Republican at the national level. Again, we'll come back to this in a little while, but in 1904, he spoke at the Republican National Convention. It was a pretty big deal for the only black elected official in Maryland. In 1897, Baltimore voters stuck with the Republicans. Baltimore mayor has a 2-year term, and another Republican won. So Alcaeus Hooper was out, and the new Republican mayor of Baltimore was William Malster. In the elections for the Maryland Senate and the House of Delegates, the Republicans held the majority. They're doing it. In the presidential election in 1896, Maryland went Republican, voting for the presidential candidate William McKinley. Maryland had been consistently Democrat since the Civil War. And in 1898, Gorman was out. 1898, his term was up, and the Republican General Assembly of Maryland told him, you know what, we're going to pick someone else. You can come on home. So Gorman was out, and now The Republican legislature selected Maryland's first ever Republican senators.